So I've heard you speak before, and we talked about xenoglossy, like people being regressed into a past life and speaking foreign languages that they have no knowledge of. Have you had that experience?
I've had that experience, even not just language, but also, ability to do something that they were never taught in this life.
Really? So what's an example of that?
Example of that could be understanding Latin, herbs, flowers, how to create medicine from nature. Suddenly be able to write down, recipes and stuff like that. That is pretty amazing, actually. And I had so many people, had past lives in France, Southern Europe, different other places, suddenly being able to speak, the language the way it was like a couple of hundred years ago, because, language changes all the time. And on the recordings, we could actually afterwards go and, research on it. Wow. And have local historians actually prove that that's the way they did it. And that particular person didn't have any knowledge about it. So I feel it's kind of intriguing. Experience. I had a friend who got paralyzed from neck down from a stupid accident, really.
Oh.
And he was really aggressive towards me because he said, well, I didn't choose this. How could you ever possibly say that people choose their lives? I was like, hey, I didn't say you chose yours, but from experience I know that's actually a fact. But if you want a session, tell me, right? And we didn't speak for a couple of years, and then he contacted me and said, now's the time. And he wanted to leave this earth, kind of.
I see.
It didn't feel well because everything was working against him. How could this possibly be, a normal way of living his life? He had a session, discovered why he chose this life, and discovered why he was so much more special, and he had more ability to do different stuff than people who could use their body in the way we do, not being paralyzed. And now he's playing rugby, being the chairman of the rugby union for handicapped rugby players in wheelchairs. He has 3 kids, a new wife, and all of that, and he's enjoying.
And he's paralyzed from the neck down still.
He even went skiing in Austria.
How do you ski?
No, actually not all. It was actually Sweden. He went skiing in Sweden with his helpers. A special designed, kind of sled with skis on. Nothing is stopping that guy. So he's
yeah. So it was kind of like maybe the lesson he got was to prove something to himself and to others.
Yeah.
The other one was a person who was a devout Christian who was blind from infancy and felt that it was unfair that God would let most people be able to see, and that he had to go through life not even knowing what it's like to see. So he wanted to know why he was born blind. He'd been angry at God all his life. So when I asked the question of his higher power, he emerges in a past life regression in medieval medieval Europe as a castle lord. He's describing a thick oak table with a big bowl of fruit in the middle, and he's looking out the castle window at green rolling hills, blue sky, deep blue, billowy clouds, and a huge apple tree with bright red apples dropping to the ground on the castle side of the moat.
By the way, this is the blind man describing.
This is a blind man having a very visual past life regression.
Right.
He turns around and describes a huge stone fireplace with dancing flames of fire. And to make a long story short, his people complained about the taxes. He responded by raising taxes and said, if you complain again, I'll raise them even higher. So his purpose in that life, according to his higher power, was to learn the difference between being a leader and a ruler. And he said, I failed miserably, so my soul chose to be born blind in this current life so that I would always remember the lesson of not abusing power and being a leader instead of a ruler.
And so how did that sit with him after he came out of the session?
First of all, he was able to let go of his anger towards God.
Okay.
Secondly, the session had been witnessed by a couple of women that he asked to sit in on the session. And he said, it was just as amazing to me to remember what it was like to see. And one of the ladies said, don't you dream? He said, yes, but I dream in touch, sound, taste, and smell because I never had a frame of reference for seeing before. He said, all my life I've wondered what red and green looked like. I've wondered what it would be like to see. I have wondered what a blue sky with billowy clouds would look like. And he said, I've wondered what dancing flames of fire would look like. And he said, now I remember seeing. Now I have to say, for the scientific skeptic, that his experience is not proof that he lived that former lifetime, but would you like to try to convince him that he fantasized it when he never had a frame of reference for what it was like to see, and now was able to remember seeing? So that case summary is one that I've included in the book. The book is chock full of some amazing stories from all over the world. 1981, I had an accident injuring my back, ended up in the hospital for several days, and had a very bad prognosis because of fractured disc with a disc fragment sticking into my spinal cord.
Oh, I'm sure that couldn't have felt very nice.
Oh, the pain was excruciating. The day before the surgical procedure was to take place, they took me down to X-ray to have some additional X-rays done to see exactly where the fragment was. And on the way to the X-ray room, I was doing some self-hypnosis and silent prayer, and felt something happen in my lower back. The feeling returned to my legs just like that within a half a second. And the X-ray showed that the disc fragment had been absorbed by my body. My doctor said it was almost as though Scotty teleported it out. And he said, I have no medical explanation for what happened, but you will not need the surgery. He said, however, you will suffer chronic back pain for the rest of your life because of a missing disc in your lower back.
Wow.
Through hypnosis and self-hypnosis, I have been able to live a normal life without the pain meds, but if I overdo it, my back will warn me something's wrong. But because of the benefits of hypnosis to help me deal with chronic back pain, it made a real believer out of me in the power of the mind.
Was led to do a past life regression with a 15-year-old girl, and one of the female students had brought her daughter, and so I was assigned to do a regression with her. And instead of directing her to go back to another life experience, I just told her to go to a time before she was born into her present life and tell me where she was. And she says, I'm in heaven.
Oh, so she actually went in between lives.
Yeah, because, you know, just before you're born. So anyhow, the girl I was working with was 15-year-old Irene, and the contact I made was Rebecca, 26 years old.
So when you say contact, you mean that you spoke to someone through her?
Yeah, another personality through Irene.
Okay.
And so I says, are you, Irene, the same? And her answer was, we are the same, but I am further ahead in time than she is, and we will unite later. Then she says, you must be privileged to be able to talk to me. Nobody from your realm has ever talked to me before. And so we began talking about the spirit world. And that experience led me into working a full 10 years with that young lady, communicating with people from the spirit world. So, 8 years previously, I worked with a young lady who had been abducted at the age of 8, and an implant put in her nose and one in her back. And she was a military person, and apparently they couldn't do anything about her emotional conflict, so she came to our research project. And in the research project, I found that she was a medium between an alien entity, personality, and present day. And the identity of the alien personality was Dinautica. And Dinautica was using rosemary as a medium to communicate. And I worked with her for a while, different days, and talked to Dinautica, and one day the communication was like static, and so I stopped the session. And when I woke the girl up, she says, all the time you were talking to me, it felt like my body was bloating, getting bigger and bigger. And I said, well, how do you feel now? She says, fine. So a week later, I worked with her again and got in touch with Dinautica, and I asked her what happened. She says the frequencies were not right, and if you'd have continued, there would have been an explosion.
Oh. Oh my goodness.
And so Dinautica introduced me to her planet leader, named Modar.
And what planet system were they from?
89 light years from Earth, the planet Valenta. Well, if you stop and think about how a light year is about 230 million miles, how 89 light years would be. And so she says she was coming from the fourth system from Earth. Now, whether she meant fourth, what do you call it?
Galaxy.
Galaxy.
Yeah.
But anyhow, why? That's where she was coming.
So we have a lot of UFO enthusiasts, as you know, in North America and around the world. Tell us about Rendlesham, the Bentwaters case,
Well,
and John Burroughs.
You know, the UFOs have been around for ages, you know, hundreds of years. There are reports about people seeing these things. And so I was selected to hypnotize a witness to that incident, which has become more known than the Roswell incident. And I was hired to have him relive his experience. Well, in his experience, him and a sergeant had observed it in the forest outside of the base, military base there, and wasn't going to say anything about it. And that night, why, he was awakened from his sleep that they're back. So he got up and went running out there, and the colonel and half, you know, some of the city officials was all there.
Oh, and the UFO was back.
Yeah, and it was there. Well, in his experience, he said the colonel told him to ask him to see how close he could get to the object. And he says, I got about 10 feet from it, got knocked back 30 feet.
Right.
So anyhow, I took him through his experience. And then, for some reason, why I said, well, I'm going to take you back to that object and I want to see if there's some occupants in it. See if you could communicate with them. So we got back and I put him next to the object. Why, suddenly 2 red streaks that come out of his collar and up over his ears, blood red. And it concerned his wife and me, so I moved him back from the craft, and instantly they disappeared. And he didn't even know what happened. I asked him to see if there's any intelligence behind. He says there's red lights all around the craft, and there's an intelligence behind that red light. And I said, well, talk to it. Who are they? Where they come from? You know, we come from a planet 89 light years from Earth. Well, we can control his mind. And we travel at the speed of light. We stop at a base on Mars before coming to your Earth. And I said, well, how long does it take you to get from Mars to Earth? And the answer was immediately 1 hour. And so a week later, the person that invited me to do that had called and said he had his staff calculate that, and he missed it by 14 minutes.
Oh.
We are here, we've been here, we're in your ground, we're in your water, we're in your sky. We are here to observe you because we believe we were once your form.
Oh, the extraterrestrials believe they were once in human form.
Yeah.
So what form were they in now? Did John Burroughs happen to be able to take a look?
Well, I had her describe, Didi describe herself to me. And it's a common big head, long arms, silvery skin, no bridge for the nose, small mouth.
Have you ever regressed anybody else who's been abducted or had?
Yeah. I had one lady back in the 80s that was checking herself in and out of hospitals from stress, and they couldn't find nothing wrong. And so she was referred to me. And under hypnosis, we found that she had a alien spirit who told me that they were preparing her for a future event. And I said, well, you're giving her too much energy, back off a little bit. And so they did, and she stopped having her problems and so forth.
But what were they preparing her for?
Huh?
What future event were there, like a global event or personal?
I don't know.
Oh.
And I have kicked myself a dozen times for getting into these things and not asking enough questions.
Yeah, because we're all curious now. Because I wonder if it was global or personal.
I would imagine that it would be global.
Ah. Oh, have you ever received information about our future as through any of your hypnotic subjects?
Yeah, I was
Future
told in '65 that this country is going to fall to a power that in 1965 was non-existent or a small power, and the reason it will fall is because of a breakdown of our moral and religious standards.
And do you know which power that is?
No. You have to take a look. There's two or three that.
Should be China.
China and North Korea and stuff. I was told also that I would see human cloning in my lifetime.
When were you told this?
Huh?
When were you told this?
Back in '65. Yeah.
Ah, so. Ooh.
And I've had one experience where in regression the person became a entity from the year 2330.
So they went forward in time.
Yeah, you can move forward, and that she was a clone. So I don't know whether that was the one I was supposed to see or whether I see reality.